where Paul says in Thessalonians, one of his letters, where he says, we would have you be clear, brothers and sisters, about those who have died, lest you grieve like those who have no hope. So I've been ordained 17 years now. And I think from the first moment that I used or saw that passage at a funeral that I presided at, it just jumped out at me. So Paul's not saying, hey, you know what, stop grieving.
Yeah.
That would be insane, right? He's trying to teach us, or rather the Lord's trying to teach us through Paul, how to grieve with hope.
Yeah.
Well, what a timely topic. I mean, I'm constantly dealing with grief, not only the people that I'm caring for, but in my own life as a man who's lost loved ones. So I had an experience not too long ago that has just so changed how I understand the communion that we share with those who've gone before us. So I'd come home, happened to be one of those nights where I had nothing going on, which was, kind of rare. It was great. I loved it. Made a bowl of pasta, went downstairs, turned on the TV. I'm watching a college football game. And it's actually not, the game hasn't even started yet, but it's a night game, and the stadium, doesn't matter where it was, everybody's dressed in white. About 95,000 people in the stands. And this particular university is known for having what they call a drill team. They don't have cheerleaders. They have a drill team that just whips the crowd up into a frenzy. So, here's all these people in white, and the stadium is so loud. It's a two-tiered stadium. It's actually bouncing. So I'm not praying. I'm just watching this football game. And as I'm sitting there, I hear the Lord say, "That's heaven." And I said, "What?" I'm just watching a football game, Lord,
Yeah.
He says, "That's heaven." And I immediately think of Hebrews 12, which has always been a passage that's been inspiring to me. Therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let's strive to take hold of all that the Lord has done for us. The Lord's just been teaching me. This has been happening for a series of months, maybe even a couple of years now, but He's helped me to really understand. And I think this is so helpful for us who are dealing with, my mom's passed away, or a child died, or my best friend's gone. Like, where are they? Do they see us? Can we talk to them? What are they doing right now? So Paul uses, or whoever the author of the letter to the Hebrews, uses this image of a stadium, which is what I felt like the Lord gave me as I'm watching this game, or just trying to unpack it further for me. That, okay, so all those who've gone before us, certainly all the saints, they're not just sitting up there in heaven going, man, I am so glad I do not live in 21st century America. Because nobody goes to a football game to watch the game. They go there to change the game. They go there to change the outcome. That's what enables, in this case, 22 people running up and down on a piece of grass or artificial turf to do things which in their backyard they could never do on their own. Because all of a sudden having tens of thousands of people cheering for you inspires you and ennobles you. And so the saints who've gone before us in heaven, they're not just watching us. Revelation talks about how they're praying for us. They're crying out from beneath the altar on our behalf. So fast forward a couple months after this scene, I'm at a wake for a good friend of mine's mom. This guy's dad had passed away maybe 20 years before. There were 12, 14 children that they had. A couple of them had passed away. So I'm sitting there leading the rosary at the wake, and there's this beautiful picture of the mother who had passed away. And we're just praying the rosary. And as I'm praying the rosary with them, all of a sudden I see the stadium again. And I see the woman, she's walking down the concourse. So it's this massive complex. And she's walking down, she can't find a seat. There's no seats in the stadium. There's one seat. It's on the end of an aisle. And so she taps this one guy on the shoulder. He turns around, it's her husband. And there's this huge embrace, and this euphoric expression on both their faces. And she sits down, and they turn their attention to the field, and there's their children on the field, all those who are still alive here. And she just turns and looks at him and says, "Now let's pray them home."
Isn't that great? What a wonderful vision.
Yeah, well, and I don't think it's fanciful. Sure, it's the way the Lord speaks to me in different ways and whatnot, but it's so scriptural. I mean, at least with regards to the saints, that's what they're doing for us. And I think that's helpful to just keep in mind. I mean, people ask all the time, like, where are my loved ones right now? What are they doing? So my encouragement to them is always, until they make it abundantly clear that they're home, they're in heaven, you pray for them.
Mhm.
So if I die, please don't presume I'm in heaven.
Right.
Presume I'm in purgatory.
Right.
Pray me home.
Yeah.
So I don't want to give the impression that everybody who dies is just instantly in heaven. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It is to say that there's a real communion that we share. And for those who've already gone before us, who are home, who are in the stands, they're praying for us, inspiring us to live great lives.
Yeah.
I need that. I need that exhortation, that inspiration. And those who've gone before us, who are not yet home, we're praying for them to get into the stands.
Yeah.
So the simple point is, our friendship never ends.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important, I think, to make clear what at least I'm talking about. I mean, I have a choice to make. You have a choice to make. Every one of us who's listening has a choice to make. I am responsible for how I'm going to respond to the offer of salvation that God has offered to me in Jesus. But there's something like it. So by all means, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something like a divine conspiracy to erode my resistance to making the wrong choice.
Right.
So I have to make a choice.
Right.
And I got to own it by all means. But thanks be to God, the communion of saints. I mean, so if the great commandment is to love God and to love neighbor, well, those who've gone before us, those who are in the stadium, those who are the great cloud of witnesses praying for us, they're loving God in heaven and they're loving their neighbor. That doesn't just include those who are home in heaven. I'm their neighbor. That means I've got a cloud of witnesses eagerly, longingly praying for me on a daily, perennial basis. Like, John, make the right choice. The Lord himself says, that my guardian angel beholds my Father's face.
Yeah.
So someone, at least one person anyway, my guardian angel, is devotedly praying for me, working on my behalf. Now, again, I have to choose to respond to that. But I find it so encouraging to know that. That's one of the points I think is real important that I clarify. But the other part that I think is really, it's so, this is our everyday experience with people who we love. We often say, well, whoever it is that I've lost, they're always in my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I get that. But there's so much more than just in your thoughts. I mean, they are somewhere. They really are somewhere.
That's right.
And so, I mean, either they're home with the Lord, they're on their way home with the Lord, or heaven forbid, they're not with the Lord and they never will be. So I'll leave to him how that's all going to work out. We just know that's a real possibility, especially for me, because that's the only person I can really be sure about. But I was talking to a good friend of mine. He's a Protestant pastor, and his best friend was his father. And when he passed away, it was just devastating for him. So we're having lunch one day. I said, do you mind if I asked if you ever talked to him? And he looked at me and says, that would never enter my mind. I said, really? But I think there's such a strong orientation in so many people who've been formed a particular way to think, I can't do that. That's talking to the dead. That's forbidden. We can't go there.
Right.
So I just shared with them, I didn't name Catherine or Therese or some others. I just shared with them some of the wisdom of the saints, that I've heard through my life as a priest and before. And as I'm sharing all this, and I shared my experiences of people that I've loved who've died and how I try to talk to them, and he's looking at me, just starts crying. And we get done, he says, I would love to be able to do that. So I saw him, this was probably 5-6 years ago. I saw him not too long ago, we were having dinner. I said, can I go back to that conversation we had? You ever talk to your dad now? He says, I talk to my dad every day.
Wow.
I said, no kidding. He says, yeah. I said, what's it like? He goes, it's so rich. The best thing I can do for my loved ones who've died is to pray for them. That someone who I love greatly, someone who's impacted my life, when they are no longer here, the right human response is to miss them. Maybe the way I'd set it up is I've always remembered something that the great late Frank Sheed wrote in his book, To Know Christ Jesus. So it's at the end of the life of Christ that he's writing, and he's talking about the moment when Jesus mounts the cross. And he says, this is the most active moment of his priesthood. When he's seemingly passive, affixed to a piece of wood. This is actually the most active, this is why he came. It's the most active moment of his whole ministry, because you can't nail God to a tree. You just can't do that. The only way he can stay on a tree is if he wants to be there. So he's willing this. And I keep that always in the forefront of my mind with regards to suffering, because I think the challenge for us when we're suffering is, or among the many challenges, is what a waste. Is there any point to this?
Or, gee, if I wasn't suffering, I could be doing this, or I could be doing that.
I could be productive.
Yeah, I could do something useful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I routinely go into nursing homes or hospitals, and I tell folks, I'll go to anoint or visit, whatnot, and I'll tell them, in my mind, and I think in God's more importantly, though to the rest of the world you look like you're no longer productive, the reality is you're the Marines of the church. Because you are now sharing in a remarkable way in the passion of Christ. And it's his passion which redeemed the world. Jesus didn't save us by his miracles or by his teaching. He saved me by his passion. When I'm suffering, even though I don't want it, and I don't want it, I've got a choice. So is there a more mysterious passage in all the Bible than Colossians 1:24, where Paul says, I fill up in my own flesh what's lacking in the sufferings of Christ for the sake of his body, which is the church. What in the world is lacking in the sufferings of Christ? Does Paul mean, if Jesus could have only hold out for another 3 hours, everything would have been great?
Yeah.
Of course not. What's lacking? My participation. It's one thing to read that in scripture, it's another thing to hear made in a class, but I've really learned it from my mom. So my mother is someone who's early mid-80s now, and who suffered intensely much of her life, much of my life anyway. And she went from being very, very sick before I was born, and then while I was a young boy, to miraculously healed. All that had riddled her when she was young, or when I was young, just gone. New Testament miracle. Just wow, incredible. God's powerful. He makes the lame walk. That's what he did with my mom.
Yeah.
To shortly before I was ordained, all the pain that she had been freed from all came back. So having gone through a miracle, she knew God could just take this away if he wanted to. He did.
Mm-hmm.
He's allowed it to come back.
Yeah.
He must have something he wants me to do with it.
Mm.
And so my mother and my father too, but they embody for me and have taught me really what Paul's saying in Colossians. And so they understand, okay, I'm being invited to share in the Lord's passion. It's not in vain. I may never see in this life the fruit that comes of it, but I know by looking at the cross that the cross was not in vain.
Mm-hmm.
It's tempting to think nothing came from that, but what came from God made man hanging on a tree? Our redemption.
Mm-hmm.
Unimaginable fruit.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to trust when I'm suffering that somehow the Lord's using this to bring fruit. And it might not be till I get home that I see the fruit, but I know now there's fruit coming of this. So I give her names. Lots of people give her names, and she just takes names on, but we do this with people in the hospitals too. And my mom just has stacks of legal pads. And my mom hurts all day, every day. She goes to bed every night with no prospect of ever waking up the next day feeling better, perhaps like many people watching right now. And so she just got into the habit somehow of writing names down, and throughout the day, she just reads the names and prays for people and says, Lord, I give you what I'm going through for them. That's love.
She's not wasting her suffering, isn't she?
That's right.
Yeah.
Because that's the choice. I can either, when suffering, not if, when it comes my way, I got one of two choices. I can either complain, kick, and scream. That's what I do. Or I can unite this to the cross, which is what she does.
And turn it into prayer, turn it into intercession.
That's right.
Turn it into love. Yeah.
That's right. I will fill up in my flesh what's lacking in the sufferings of Christ for the sake of his body. That's what I'm doing. This is his body. And I'll walk in, I'll say to somebody, you'll pray with them, anoint them, then I'll say, I have work for you to do. I need you. I have really special assignment for you. And I will bring them names. I say, I need you to pray for Sean right now.
Wow.
Or for Beth and Steve.
Yeah.
Whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I need you to use this.
Yeah.
And we used to use the expression offered up. Holy Father still likes that expression.
Yeah.
So I like unite it. So, because
Yeah.
it reminds me this is passive.
Yeah.
So when you're lying in that hospital bed or that nursing home and you feel like, what's coming of this? You say, Lord, I'm going to give this to you for them. Father Francis Martin, who you know well, and was a good teacher for me and a great mentor. He uses this image that I've always found helpful. He says, life is like one of those massive wall tapestries that used to hang in these monasteries and castles and palaces and whatnot. Now we see them in museums. They're massive. When you look at it from the front, you see all the beauty. It's incredibly well done. But he says, you walk behind the tapestry, you don't see any of that. You just see chaos. See all these strings hanging down. There's no purpose to anything, or so it seems. Doesn't look like there's any meaning to it. There's no pattern. You can't see anything.
Yeah, random threads. And all that, yeah.
And he says, life is like living on the back of that tapestry, especially for those of us who are suffering. It just looks totally random. What good can come out of this? It's just a bunch of strings hanging down. And what Revelation gives us, whether it's that passage in Colossians 1:24 where Paul says, I fill up in my own flesh what's lacking in the sufferings of Christ for the sake of his body, which is the church. Or whether it's the Lord boasting of his wounds to the apostles, and he reminds them what it is that he's done for us. Revelation gives us a glimpse of the other side of the tapestry. Yeah, I think that's the key word, actually, is encouragement. So the devil's game for almost all of us is to try to discourage us. And he tries different tactics, So undoubtedly, many of us right now, perhaps especially who are suffering, are finding ourselves in a pit. That's his game. He wants to get us into a pit. He doesn't really care how he gets us there. He just wants us into a hole where he can taunt us or belittle us or tell us that our life isn't meaningful or that whatever we're going through is just a waste or we've been cast aside by God. He doesn't care. He's a liar. That's what Jesus tells us. He's a liar. Don't listen to him. Tell him to go to hell. It's the only appropriate time to say that. Tell him to go to hell.
Yeah.
I'm not listening to you.
Yeah, that's good.
And the Lord just wants to give heart to us. That's the encouragement, huh? So discouragement, the devil just wants to sap all of the heart and the strength out of us. But the Lord right now, he just wants to pump up the heart again, huh? He wants to fill our hearts as we look upon the cross, as we contemplate what it is that Jesus has done for us, that he has redeemed me by his pain and his glorious resurrection, huh? But the pain was first. And so those of you right now who are feeling low, who are feeling in the pit, the Lord's got his hand. He just wants to pull you out and say, I have not forgotten you. You are not cast aside. It's not that I'm too busy with whatever's going on in Africa right now. You are on my mind. I am at work within you. You and I are cooperating right now. I've invited you to work with me to help redeem the world, just like Paul did, just like all the saints down through the ages have. Right now, it's your time. Now the baton's in your hand. Be encouraged by that. The Lord's with you. He's within you. He wants to help you. Plug your ears to hell. Listen to the Lord. Keep your eyes on him.